Fox 8 has done extensive reporting on claims of church sex abuse this year.
We learned Richard Windmann, as a child, was repeatedly abused, first by Boy Scout leaders, then allegedly by an NOPD detective, a Jesuit high school janitor, and a priest.
Kimberly Kurth has his story.
I was in front of my house with a bicycle ramp. I wanted to be Evel Knievel. That was my thing. That's who I looked up to.
Like other little boys growing up in the 70s, Richard Windmann had big dreams of being a famous stuntman like Evel Knievel. He had the dirty blonde Knievel hair. He was cute, sweet, a typical mid-city kid. While Windmann practiced his best Knievel feat in front of his house on Dimmicourt Street near Jesuit High School, a Boy Scout troop leader stopped by to talk with his mom.
I didn't know it then, but what they would do is go through the neighborhoods and identify single moms and ingratiate themselves, and then we'll take care of the kids. He's going to be in the Boy Scouts.
Unbeknownst to Windmann and his mother, that new Boy Scout troop was formed for another reason, a dark reason.
It was pedophiles coming in, starting a troop for the express purpose of having access to kids.
Only 8 years old, Windmann's short time in the Boy Scouts would become violent. He says all 4 of his scout leaders, Raymond Woodall, Richard Stanley Halverson, Harry Kramer, and Louis Ciali, raped him.
And more. And more. People would fly in from out of town.
The men, who parents trusted to take care of their young boys, had formed an infamous pedophile ring, Boy Scout Troop 137.
These people threatened my son, and right now he is crying over this scene, and I'm very upset about it. Myself, I think they should be punished.
Years passed before the troop was on police radar.
It's almost sickening to think about it, you know?
Mason Spong had no idea the case he worked in 1976 as a young detective would change his life.
At one of the local drugstores, a man saw some sexually explicit pictures of young children, and he reported it.
Spong, now an Orleans Parish DA investigator, says that tip led detectives to the ring, and their investigation would reveal men traveled to New Orleans to have sex with the boys, and the children were even taken across parish lines.
They took these kids across the lake to K-Ball-B Ranch, and they had sexual acts over in St. Tammany. And this went on for a while, you know, a couple years before we even came onto these pictures that were turned over to us.
As part of the case, Spong met a little boy named Ricky. Ricky told unimaginable stories of abuse.
He was frail, his personality was twice as big as his body. You know, he was a good kid.
That boy was Richard Windmann.
At some point, Ricky was able to speak to these other children, and he got them to trust us.
You were able to corroborate everything that Richard Windmann told you as a little boy.
Yes, everything.
If convicted of all charges, Woodall could get up to 165 years in prison, and Ciali could get 60.
Spong says Windmann's brave testimony became critical to prosecute the scout leaders.
It was kind of gut-wrenching because I've heard these different stories from these different children, and then to hear it again and to watch Ricky testify, he was pretty good. He brought all the facts forward. He was looking at nothing but adults in the courtroom, all strangers, plus he had the press there.
The aggressive, cruel, crass nature of these violations is such that these little minds are going to be affected for a long, long time.
Strongly worded written opinion, Judge Oliver Schulenkamp called Raymond Woodall's crimes repulsive.
And as the case progressed, the detectives involved kept watch of the young victims. But the investigator checking in on Windmann was moved to another assignment. So Windmann was introduced to the lead detective of the NOPD's pedophile unit at the time, Stanley Burkhart.
So he asked Stanley Burkhart to keep an eye on him, you know, because he was special to us.
Even though Windmann's rapists were in prison, he still wasn't safe.
Burkhart definitely knew the Boy Scouts, all of those guys.
The cop who was supposed to protect children accused of putting a young woman through another haunting round of sexual abuse.
In one case, I contacted 2 police officers. One of them actually actively discouraged me from bringing it up. And the other one said, "Don't call back," hung up the phone. So who do you call? You know? As a kid, you don't know to call the Attorney General or the state police or the FBI.
Windmann says Burkhart even threatened him with a picture of a dead teen named Eddie when he refused to listen. Another one of Burkhart's alleged victims told us the same thing.
Stanley opened up one of the drawers of his desk and showed me the picture of what I now believe is Eddie. Couldn't remember the name at that time, but I believe it. There was crime scene photos of a decomposing body.
Vic V.J. Groomer says he first met Burkhart in the 70s when the former sex crimes detective moved into the Bayou St. John apartment complex that his parents managed. Groomer says he and Burkhart's nephews would play together.
That would get me in his apartment. He'd have his nephews there, so it was kind of okay to go run in to the apartment, and then eventually his nephews wouldn't be there.
That's when Groomer says the rapes began. He was just 8 years old.
You know, he would point guns at you and click, click, and pull the trigger. He'd point the gun at himself, put the gun to his head.
Groomer only recently told his family what happened to him as a little boy.
But then to see Richard Windmann's story and to see him, to see his picture and to see another human being that was molested by the same guy, it just was, it really set a lot in motion.
And as reported in this 1982 Times-Picayune article, the body of Edward Wells was found floating in the Mississippi River. The coroner believed the 17-year-old drowned, but Burkhart, the detective on the case, told the reporter he was convinced Wells was murdered. When Groomer saw this picture of Wells, he knew he had seen Eddie before.
Holy shit, that's him. That's him. Very much. Just he was staring at me, and I had seen him alive. I knew the face.
The NOPD says they are now taking a new look at Wells's death.
Looking back at it, he's an animal. He's a monster. It's the best I can say for him.
Burkhart was convicted of numerous sex crimes in the 1980s and 90s, but was never prosecuted for Windmann's allegations. Court documents, though, show Windmann was called as a witness in a 2011 federal case against Burkhart. The court concluded then Burkhart was a sexually dangerous person, and in coming to that ruling, the judge cited significant events in Burkhart's life, including that while a police officer, he molested Richard Windmann, a young boy at the time. The opinion also says the court finds clear and convincing evidence that the testimony of Mr. Windmann is credible, and the denial by Mr. Burkhart of this incident is not credible.
It was almost more gut-wrenching to hear that one of our own abused Ricky. It was, to me, it was worse than the initial blow when we first started investigating this case, that one of our guys violated this child. It was tough.
Burkhart served time in federal prison but got out in March of 2015. The NOPD confirms it's now investigating a sexual assault allegation against Burkhart from the 70s. Windmann says he is the victim in that case.
He just doesn't need to be out in the streets. He's a dangerous, dangerous person.
When Windmann shared his story with us in a TV exclusive earlier this year, he also told us about even more sexual abuse.
And Burkhart also knew the Jesuit. I played basketball in the back of Jesuit, and there was Burkhart and Peter Modica on the sidelines, so they knew each other.
Windmann, 12 years old at the time, wasn't a Jesuit high school student, but he says school janitor Peter Modica brought him on campus often. One day, Modica started raping him, and then priest and theology teacher Cornelius Carr walked in.
Then I thought it was over. It's a priest. It's a priest. He's a janitor. I can't tell you I thought it was over, and man, when he walked over to me, while Pete Monaco was sodomizing me and put his hand on my back and started masturbating, telling me to relax. I was just destroyed. I was destroyed.
Windmann says the abuse finally stopped once he was older and he didn't believe Monica's threats anymore.
He said, I'll murder your mom. Oh, he also said he'd murder me too, you know, the whole thing. Yeah.
Said he'd murder your mother.
Windmann came forward in 2012 about the sexual abuse at Jesuit High. The catalyst? The Penn State sex abuse scandal. After hearing that news, Windmann emailed then Jesuit High president, Father Raymond Fitzgerald.
I didn't go for money. I went for counseling and spiritual guidance. And they're like, nah, here's a whole bunch of money. Shut up, go away.
Jesuit High School eventually paid Windmann nearly $500,000 in a confidential settlement.
Jesuits come out and said that the confidentiality clause on those settlements is at the request and only done if the victim. So what's your response to that?
Never asked for it. A confidentiality clause in that particular scenario only serves to protect them, not me. You know, I would never ask for such a thing because I would never put a ball gag in my mouth.
Windmann decided to go public with his story this year, and we were the only television station to interview him at his home near Fort Worth, Texas. He wanted to speak out to protect other children.
And in this current climate and environment, we need to demand more of the church until they absolutely come clean. We just drink the Kool-Aid and go along with it. Now's the time to say no.
Both the Archdiocese of New Orleans and the Jesuits' U.S. Central and Southern Province recently released lists of clergy members credibly accused of child sex abuse. Cornelius Carr, the priest who Windmann says abused him, was on both lists.
So we can't trust just the list. There needs to be an investigation.
We also learned priest Cornelius Carr was housed at Fordham University in New York after Windmann's alleged abuse. According to the university, the now deceased Carr lived at a Jesuit nursing home near the school's campus. In a statement to Fox 8, the university said it was not aware of the allegations against Carr until a report in the school's student newspaper. The spokesperson said Fordham believes Mr. Windmann is telling the truth about what happened to him, and it is heartbreaking. We hope he finds justice and healing.
Look for extensive coverage of claims of child sex abuse in our area online. Use your Roku and Amazon devices or the Fox 8 News app to watch those